The Starkiller base attack. You guys know me, I've lamented the loss of the New Republic Space Navy many times, and well, can you blame me? We've been told that alongside the Hosnian system, the New Republic lost its entire defense force. Recently, in the TLJ Visual Dictionary, for example, we learned that apparently the entire collection of the New Republic's T-85 X-Wings were destroyed, alongside the New Republic's capital ships. Let me just say that demilitarization as a principle isn't necessarily bizarre in the Star Wars universe. It essentially transitions the burden of defending space to member states within a government, with the state instead being mostly responsible for protecting key government assets. Although demilitarization in the New Republic's case, in canon, probably doesn't make sense, it does provide some rationale for why the totality, or at least a vast majority of the fleet, would be in the Hosnian system, which was, at the time, the location of the New Republic's roving capital. However, more and more has called this into question, and although I'm not nearly as up to date on canon material as I am with Legends, my friend Mr. New Republic, who you should follow on Twitter by the way, he helps me make a bunch of memes and he's just a funny guy, and unsurprisingly was as upset with the issue as I am, pointed something out to me that has been obvious this entire time, but also appeared specifically in the recent Poe Dameron issue for Age of Resistance. The fact is pretty simple. We see not only a New Republic space station outside of Hosnian Prime, but also one staffed by a New Republic starfighter squadron including state-of-the-art T-85 X-Wings. As a note, the station and the presence of Rapier Squadron was also mentioned in other material, especially in Before the Awakening. Anyway, the station, which is in the Mirren sector, is specifically identified as the Brooksian and a New Republic space station. We can see a full painted-on logo on the hull, so it's obviously a semi-permanent fixture in the area. We don't see any capital ships or anything like that, but at least one squadron of starfighters was there to help protect the shipping lanes from pirates and other entities, meaning that the New Republic, at least to some extent, continued to perform tasks which one might otherwise expect to be within the purview of local defense forces even after the demilitarization. The station is also explicitly armed with what it calls surface guns, and those are probably turbo lasers or laser cannons, so this isn't just simply some X-Wings parking on a shipping station. What's more, we know the station houses at least an admiral, so there are some serious military resources tied up there, outside of the Hosnian system. So we have a space station with an entire squadron of highly advanced starfighters. That's important not only for its own merits, but also because of the precedent it sets. There could be hundreds, thousands, or even more similar squadrons or space stations, or just protecting other trade lanes, danger areas, etc. Some of these could be fairly small scale, like what we see here, but others maybe not. Although we know that the New Republic failed to respond to the First Order threat specifically, it's also very possible that capital ships were dispatched near other hotspots, whether that was near non-First Order warlords or Imperial Remnant groups, it's hard to say, but there's definitely a distinct possibility. What we do know is that the New Republic's demilitarization was not complete, and it was not even done nearly to the effect of the pre-Clone Wars era Republic. Rather, it was more of a winding down of forces, and also more importantly, I think we're learning a stance towards non-aggression. So even within those confines, ships must exist even after the destruction of the Central Force at Hosnian Prime. There's no way that this one space station was a peculiarity, and if anything, it seems to be more of sort of a backwater posting. There must be other remaining New Republic forces is my point, and perhaps we'll see them actually join up with the Resistance and form a unified opposition to the First Order in Episode 9. That's my hope at least. That being said, we know that the First Order did also engage in a sort of galaxy-wide blitz after the firing of Starkiller Base, so many of these fairly would have been wiped out or at least seen combat. But my point is, some at least are still out there alongside the individual sector or system defense forces planets would have been forced to make after the demilitarization. And just as a note regarding timeline, we know that Poe was still stationed at Mirren by 33 ABY, a mere year before Episode 7, so it's very, very unlikely that things would have changed drastically in that time such that my analysis here no longer makes sense. In other words, the New Republic military still exists, at least in some respects. But that's all I have to say about that for now. Hopefully we learn more in episode 9 and the expanded universe content afterwards. Once again, a special thank you to Mr. New Republic for his diligent love of the New Republic and for helping me come up with this video idea. Today's community #AskEck question of the day comes from Joe, who asks, how did Legends end and where was the storyline headed when Disney took over? So there's two things to talk about here, the comics and the books. I'll only mention the comics briefly because I'm not as familiar with Legacy Volume 2, but that is the furthest you can get in the Star Wars EU timeline and was telling a story that was halted when Star Wars comic rights transferred to Marvel. Regarding the books, which I'm much more familiar with, the last book is Crucible and certainly ends on not a cliffhanger but with a lot of story left to be told. Basically, after Fate of the Jedi, Luke and the other Jedi Knights are looking for the Mortis monolith because they know that Abeloth eventually will come back. There's that going on, and also the threat of the lost tribe of the Sith, which has been weakened but not totally destroyed. So the storyline would have been continued, at least at first, by the Sword of the Jedi trilogy, which, as the name suggests, would have starred Jaina Solo, and probably more directly a trilogy being worked on by Troy Denning, who wrote Crucible and many of the books in Fate of the Jedi and Legacy of the Force. Ultimately, it's pretty disappointing because we'll most likely never get some of these answers. I think the biggest remaining plot thread is what would have happened between Ben Skywalker, the son of Luke, and Vistara Kai, who was his one-time lover but also a Sith. But I also found the search for Mortis to be pretty compelling, and I don't know, it's just disappointing that we'll never get it. Oh, one other thing that I would have liked to see is what happened with Darth Krayt and Alana Solo, and how did Luke just sort of allow the one Sith to gain power? Thanks for the question, Joe. If you guys have one you'd like me to answer in a future video, leave it down below with the #AskEck and I'll get to it maybe sometime. Make sure though that you like this video, that you subscribe and turn notifications on, that you leave a comment, and you do all those other things that better YouTubers remind you to do. Anyway, until next time guys, this has been EckhartsLadder. Have a great week and may the Force be with you.